It's a big glass of vodka you got there.
I was waiting for somebody.
Okay, we are live. Thank you everyone for tuning in and joining us for another episode of Crystal Lake Publishing's videocast Beneath the Lake. I am your host, Todd Keisling, and I am completely unprepared for this, so this is going to be a lot of fun. For whom? I don't know, but we'll see. So I have two very exceptionally talented authors, and should I say, I guess author and / poet, right? I guess it counts. Joining me today, I have Stephanie Wytovich. Say hello, Stephanie.
Hi.
And I have Patrick Frievald.
Hi, everybody.
I hope I didn't mispronounce your names. I should have asked that.
No, you did a rock star job.
Yeah, almost everybody calls me Frievald, and it's wrong. So Frievald is good. You did well.
I did it. Yay, I'm not getting fired.
Rich,
So, we have a couple of people watching us live right now. These are our Patreon subscribers, and if I don't mention something about this, Joe Maynard will kill me. So, thank you all for watching us and for supporting Crystal Lake's Patreon. Those of you who may be watching the recording later on, if you'd like to interact with us on these live broadcasts, all it costs you is $1 a month to subscribe to Crystal Lake's Patreon campaign. All the links and everything is going to be down below. And with that said, now that I've can check that box, I am gonna, just talk with our panel. So, how are you guys doing?
So far, so good. I'm glad my voice is back. So I was a little nervous about that last night when I woke up and couldn't mutter a single word. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Good.
Yeah, I cooked all morning and made a lot of really spicy food and managed to not destroy my voice. So I think things are good.
Right on.
How are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm fabulous. I slept weird. I have like a kink in my neck and it hurts. So I'm in pain. Every moment you see me on camera is painful one. So this is my pain face.
It's painful for us to see you on camera too.
I thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. I should. I have a funny anecdote about the organization of this particular broadcast. I sent when I was talking back and forth with Joe about who's available, who can we get on the show and everything, and for Writers on Writing, who was involved in Writers on Writing, and I sent you, Stephanie, the message, and then I didn't hear from you for a while, and I told Joe, I'm like, she probably thinks I'm this weird creeper guy. Like, I met her briefly at Nikon, and that was it.
Not the case. And then it was funny because, so I saw your message, and I was like, okay, I have to email him back. And so I wrote it in my planner, and then I was in my email, and I realized that I, emailed Joe back first, and I was like, man, we're really just fucking everything. Forget everything else. So I was kind of concerned that you were probably like, man, she's not speaking to me.
It's like
Not
well,
the case.
it was kind of funny because we met briefly on. I was the last day at Nikon, and
Yeah.
my editor Amelia is like, Stephanie, I need to get you to sign my copy of Gutted. And I'm like, wait, you're Gutted, Stephanie? Hold on a second, I'm gonna go get my book. And,
I prefer to be referred from that from now on. I
Just
want to be
Gutted Stephanie.
From here on out.
yeah. And
That's beautiful.
I should also say that Patrick has these amazing stuffed peppers that he brought to Nikon, which were incredible. At least I think they were.
Oh
yours.
yeah. Because I remember like you giving me one, and I was like, "Can I trust you with this?" And I was super concerned about it for a while. They were fantastic.
Well, I like very spicy food, but I'm smart enough to know that when I'm cooking for a crowd, that you need to tone it down a bit.
Yeah.
So those were definitely toned down compared to something I might make just for myself. But yeah, it's
okay.
I'm not all evil.
I like it. I like your style.
Well, they were amazing, and the hotter the better, I say.
Yes. Touche.
So, Writers on Writing Volume 4. This is coming out next week, I believe, if the Amazon page is accurate. Looks like it's coming out on October 28th. And those of you who are watching who may not be familiar with the Crystal Lake series, Writers on Writing is a series of essays by established and new authors alike, basically talking about the craft, the how-tos, the pitfalls you might run into, anything and everything related to the business of writing, the craft of writing, all that wonderful stuff, the ins and outs, if you will. And we're up to the 4th volume now. I was fortunate enough to be in the very first volume, and it's now grown to a 4-volume series. And Stephanie and Patrick have essays in the latest volume, which is coming out next week. You can pre-order it now. So I have some notes here about your essays, because I was fortunate enough to get the book way before it was in Kindle form. I have a Word document open, as a matter of fact.
Oh wow. So do
Such technology.
I know. It's amazing. So you guys, I liked your essays. I like them a lot, actually, and I think they especially will be beneficial to anyone who is just starting out in the field. I don't really have an order that I'm going to go in. I'm just going to throw these out there. So, Blunt Force Trauma. That is the title of Stephanie's essay, and I found it interesting because I've never. Well, let me back up a second. I myself personally I don't identify as a poet. I've written poetry. I'm horrendously bad at it, and it was interesting to me to look at poetry as a means of storytelling. And I think maybe that's why I'm hilariously bad at writing poetry, is because I don't look at it as a means of storytelling, or never have before. Maybe that's just a sign of my ineptitude. But it was really interesting to look at it that way, that for me personally, your essay kind of turned things around in my viewpoint on that. And so thank you for that. That was pretty cool. So writing, the whole concept of writing as a catharsis and a medication. And I really enjoyed the part of the essay where you were talking about how you took all of your old journals and you taped them up together and put them away, and then you later on went back to them, cut them open, and started taking out the bits that worked for you and the bits that didn't. And I thought that was a really interesting, almost like a real world example of how you go from a first draft to a second draft, because you're going back through this thing that you've written and picking out everything that doesn't work, and you've taken time away from it. You come back and say, okay, this is where it's not working, this is where it is working, and then it kind of becomes this new thing. So That's not really a question. That was.
Yes.
I just. I'll make that easy for you. And next to Patrick. No, I'm kidding. So that was an observation I had about your essay, and in something that you really focused on was how you writing as going back to the catharsis and a form of medication, writing to get your demons out and kind of mining those personal demons for content. Do you think that writing is an inherent device that we as a species have as a way of confronting our own demons and confronting these things that we would otherwise be afraid to face?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is for me. I don't know if everybody approaches writing that way. I mean, like I talked about in the essay, the reason I started writing in the first place was because my then therapist recommended it to me as a way to talk and kind of confront things that I wasn't comfortable talking to other people about. So other people might be natural born storytellers. For me, that wasn't the case. So writing has always been that, whether I'm doing prose, whether I'm doing poetry, to me, it definitely has that therapeutic quality to it, to let me confront things that maybe I'm not comfortable talking about, in person. But definitely poetry more so than prose. Poetry kind of takes on its own emotional form with me when I'm writing that I don't really see in my prose. I mean, it's there, but it's not. I don't think it's as strong as it is with my poetry. So.
Right on.
Yeah.
And I also, in preparation for this, I went back and I reread your poem that opens up the gutted anthology, which is on sale right now from Crystal Lake Publishing.
Yes.
And it was really interesting to read the essay and then go back and read your work and then kind of see it in practice. And it, I liked the poem to begin with, but going back and reading it again with fresh eyes after, kind of getting insight into your approach made me appreciate it a lot more. So I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, Stephanie's poem, The Morning After Was Filled with Bone, is the opener for the Gutted Anthology. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. This is the only piece of your work, aside from the essay, that I've read. I apologize. I'm a bad host.
You don't have to apologize for that.
But no, I mean, I try to get... What's that, Patrick? Go ahead.
That's a funny thing about being a writer, and as you meet so many writers and you want to read, and there's simply not enough minutes in a day, and there's not enough days in a year. I mean, it's at some point you stop apologizing for not having read something of somebody's, because you just can't. I mean, I now know, and in the last 4 years, I've met probably 1,000 writers, and it's impossible to read everything. I mean, just one thing from every person that you've met. You can't do it. And so when someone hasn't read something of yours or anything of yours, it's just like, yeah, well, that's how things go. It's not something that anyone ever should apologize for, but it always feels awkward too when you're talking to someone and then they're like, oh, yeah, so yeah, you haven't read anything of mine, have you? So it's so it's a weird thing because it's a little awkward, and at the same time it shouldn't be awkward because it's impossible. Something that can't be done shouldn't make you feel awkward for not having done it, right? And yet when you're face to face with someone and you go, nope, I'm not familiar with your work, I haven't read it, maybe I've heard of it, and that's all. We've been Facebook friends for 5 years, and nope, I've never done it. And
but it happens. It totally happens. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Patrick. Thank you for getting me off the hook there. But I will say that I'm intrigued enough to read more of your stuff. So I am looking forward. You have a book coming out, do you not?
I do. Right. I have a novel. My debut novel is coming out.
It's awesome.
It'll be out. It's available for pre-order now from Dark Regions. I think that everybody that backed the Kickstarter campaign will get it around either on the 30th or on Halloween itself. And then everybody else, it'll be live in November for purchase. So very excited.
Right on. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we do have a question in the audience, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to go to the question, and then I'm going to go to you, Patrick. So, Stephanie, this question is from a gentleman named Edward Sardor. His question is, so do you think writing allows you to express your feelings in a way that helps you deal with issues you might not otherwise confront?
Oh my God, absolutely. And I think the poem that we were talking about in Gutted is a really, really good example of me doing that, because the poem itself is about a woman who's dealing with, she's dealing with body issues, she's dealing with body dysmorphia, she's dealing with a lot of things that are, really uncomfortable to talk about in general, but she's doing it from this, from the perspective of a skeleton. So I think that that's conquering a lot of things that females deal with on a daily basis that, while I think a lot of people are aware of those issues, like none of us are super comfortable talking about them or admitting them to ourselves. So writing that poem, gave me kind of the freedom, and that's kind of why I like doing horror in the first place too, because you can tap into these like raw, visceral, like less than beautiful images that maybe some of us are all feeling, but it's acceptable in horror and it's welcomed and it's, empathized with. And so it really gives you the freedom and the range to kind of just be as raw as you want to be. And then, have people celebrate you and your work for it. So I think, especially with poetry, 100%, I don't think that I would feel comfortable talking about a lot of the things that I write about in person. But when it's just me and the page, it's a completely different story. And that's why poetry is always my preferred form, because I feel like I can be more honest with myself in it.
That's a good answer. I approve. Thanks for the question, Edward. So, Patrick, my friend, who told me that
Yes,
I was an ugly-looking man when you joined the hangout today.
I needed something to say. I think it's the scraggly gray beard,
Yeah.
Wait, I've got one of those too. The glasses, maybe 4 eyes. No, I don't think I can. I don't think I can win on it. I set it to be obnoxious, and apparently it worked because it's 20 minutes later and it's still eating at you. So
mission accomplished, asshole. No, I'm kidding. It was all in good fun.
Friendship.
Yes.
Hey,
you know what? Honestly, I can't say anything bad about Patrick because one, he brought those really delicious stuffed peppers to Nikon. Also, he walked right up to me and shook my hand and introduced himself. And that, on the first day, that Nikon was my first conference, I must say.
Oh,
so
I didn't know
he
that.
walked right up to me and introduced himself right away, and I appreciated that. So thank you, Patrick. Now,
sure.
don't you feel bad
it's
for being
funny,
a dick.
Going to the question that was asked to Stephanie, I'm kind of not that way at all. I'm known for being reasonably blunt, but I'm talk to anybody about anything in person, and I have walking up to someone and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" When I knew you online, but I didn't know you in person. That sort of thing is very, very normal, and I know a lot of people write for a lot of reasons about expressing themselves in this way or that. And to me, I will, the topics you're always supposed to avoid: politics, religion, philosophy, stuff like that in polite company. Yeah, I talk about those all the time. And if it's not that, then it's like snarky, good-natured abuse. And that's pretty much how I interact with people. So
Yeah, I like
a hello and feeding people also, it's a nice icebreaker too, to show up and say, oh, there's a bring a dish to pass thing. Awesome, because everybody likes food, and I think that food is one of the most wonderful things in the world, and it's a nice way to get to know people and have people get to know you a little bit. At the very least, it gives you something to talk about right off the bat, right? As you can say, oh, these are good, or ow, that burned my mouth off, or whatever it happens.
Yeah. Why did you poison me?
Right. Arsenic surprise.
I'm very honest, Shirley Jackson. We've always lived in the castle vibe here lately, so
Gotcha.
just ignore me.
Very good.
I got poisoned by Patrick Frievald, and all I got was this shitty T-shirt.
Oh my God, that should become a thing. That should be at least an econ thing.
That's next summer. I'm gonna go to Photoshop as soon as we're done here.
Oh.
Sorry, Patrick.
It's all good.
So,
Look, I have eight older brothers. I took more shit by the time I was 5 than you will dish out in your whole life. So you can just bring whatever you got, and I'll just roll with it. So
wow.
Awesome.
Wow. I'm sorry. You're the youngest?
I'm the second youngest of 11. Yeah, there's
Oh
9
my
boys and 2 girls.
Cool.
That's a big family.
Huge family.
Yep.
That's great, though. Wow.
Nice. That's cool. So, you have an essay called Description, You Can't Win, So Don't Play.
That's great. What a fantastic title.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like that.
Yeah. I like it.
And I'm gonna actually open this with a quote from said essay. The truth is, nobody reads your book and gets out of it precisely what you want them to. And I just want to say that I agree with that 100%, and damn it, that's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I've always been one to prefer unpleasant realities to pleasant fiction when it comes to what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it's really true. A lot of writers, the gist of the essay is that a lot of writers want to be like movie directors, where they're put exactly what they want you to see on the frame. They can position things where they want them. The movement, the action, the colors, the sound, everything is going to come into your brain exactly the way that they've staged it. And writing fundamentally is not that way. And when you're writing, the essay is fundamentally about overwriting, because overwriting is a chronic problem for most new writers. They just put in, and I decided to focus specifically on description because you have to surrender control to your reader's imagination, because it doesn't matter how well you describe something, they're not going to picture what you described. They're going to picture their version of what you described. And recognizing that right off the bat allows you to target the things that are important. It allows you to focus on the things that have emotional impact, that are going to affect the tone, that are going to affect the mood, because that's what your story is always about. It doesn't matter what it is you're writing. It's about how it makes the reader feel. If you can impact those things, then you're doing a good job. If you're trying to control all of the other little details, it'll get away from you. You're going to bog down your story. It's going to be probably way too hard of a slog to get through in order to get to any meat. You'll have lost what was really important in all the minutia. So you just accept it and you say, okay, I actually can't control what the reader is going to read, and prove this easily too. Take a description of something, a paragraph or 2 paragraphs describing someone, hand it out, have 100 people read it, give it back, and then ask them questions about it. And people are going to have very, very, very different answers. And one of the fun parts of doing that, is that I mentioned in the essay, is that people will even have details that were never mentioned. Not only will they disagree on what's on the page, they'll have all kinds of things that their brain just filled in, and because we have rich, vivid imaginations, and we picture things, and then become part of it for us, and it can be details that you didn't even mean. And so you need the ones that you do mean to be clear and front forward on the page, so that the reader gets at least the emotional impact that you're trying to go for.
Yeah, I agree, and reading your essay reminded me of something that I had a professor in college talk about. He actually was a filmmaker in himself, but he taught creative writing, and he referred to this sort of thing as the extreme close-up. He talked about it in film terminology, and it was a matter of getting the instinct as a writer to know when you need to zoom in and when not to. And a lot of what you talked about with letting the reader do, fill in the gaps, so to speak. I mean, you want to put enough in there, just enough, okay, he had a pencil. You don't have to say if it's a mechanical pencil, you don't have to say if it's a number 2 pencil. The reader's going to figure that out themselves. But, like you said, a lot of, young writers they'll want to dictate every single little detail in there, and it does, causes a lot of bloat, and if it happens to end up on an editor's desk, then they're going to, want to kill you. But
or just not take your book.
Or just not take your book, that too.
Yeah.
So my question in relation to this is in terms of, overwriting and also your counterpoint of using the Neil Gaiman example, of how he goes on for pages describing this tree. How would you recommend a young writer, kind of an exercise or, something how would you recommend they kind of learn to develop that instinct of knowing when to, go, pull back or, dive in and really, go overboard with detail because it's important? Like, how do they determine what's important or not?
Sure. And I don't know that there's a good answer to that question. All writing advice sucks. All of it. Including any writing advice that I've ever given. And the best that I can do most of the time is to say, know the rules, learn them very well, so that when you break them, you're breaking them on purpose and with a purpose. And that goes for everything. And whether it's Cormac McCarthy not using appropriate punctuation, which he can get away with because he's Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah.
It's not really my choice. I think his books would actually be better with quotation marks where they belong, but he's a little more famous than I am, so I guess we'll give him that one.
Though. You're not alone.
But when it comes to, learn the rules, and the rules, I don't just mean grammar and punctuation and spelling and things. There's a lot of really petty things that come up. Like one of the things I mentioned is like toward, forward, and backward. You can write them forward, and backwards. You can put the S's on them, and yet that annoys something like 25% of readership.
Yeah.
Whereas toward, forward, and backward without the S's doesn't annoy anybody. They're both technically correct, but one that isn't going to annoy people, especially since a lot of those people are editors. And yet sometimes, if you have in dialogue, that can go right out the window, certainly. There are lots of other rules.
Example. That was a perfect example, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a stupid, petty bullshit rule, and yet there it is.
Yep.
Kind of the same thing. Neil Gaiman can get away with spending 3 pages on a tree because he really wanted to describe that tree, and he did a really good job. It stopped the story dead, but it was an awesome description, and he broke the rules knowing that he was doing so. I recently just read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Some things that I typically don't like. He started with a prologue, which I don't particularly care for. His opening line was crap, in my opinion. There's an enormous amount of exposition and info dumps, and he circles around, and there's like meta stories within stories, but he does it all so very, very well. In line, which was "It was night again," which doesn't do anything for me at all, and I'm amazed the editor left it in. But the rest of the story, he does it so well that it works, and it's a really good book. If you read fantasy, I really recommend The Name of the Wind. He knew what he was doing when he was breaking those rules. He wasn't wandering off down paths and stopping his plot line dead because he didn't know any better. He was doing it with purpose. Description and writing and overwriting and all of that stuff is the exact same thing. And so in terms of developing that instinct, it's really a matter of what do you have on the page and why is it there? If you can't tell me why it's there, you haven't done your job well enough yet. Maybe you're a gifted genius and you don't have to, and you can just vomit forth stuff onto the page, and then editors give you lots of money and lots of readers buy your books, and good for you. But that's not most people. If you're new and you're looking for writing advice, the biggest piece of advice I can give is know why you're doing things. them with purpose. It goes right to what you were talking about with Stephanie there, with the rewriting and taking out everything that isn't necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. You need to figure out what's necessary. Every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every detail, every chapter, every character, every plot line, for a reason, and you can justify it, then maybe it should be there. If you can't justify it, it probably shouldn't. And that pretty much sums up all writing advice sucks, except apparently that.
Here, here. Rock on, sir.
Thank you for that, Patrick. Appreciate that. Next week, kids, we'll be talking about everything that Patrick said and why he's wrong. No, I'm kidding. He actually is absolutely... He's absolutely right. I agree 110% with him on that, especially that extra 10%. It does remind me of something that my editor Amelia, who I believe you have met. She when we were first started working together on my first novel, there was this point where she basically started highlighting things, and she said, you need to explain to me why this is here. Justify it. Doesn't matter if it's going to go in the story or not. You need to know why it's there. And it was something that I had kind of always taken for granted that I thought I knew but didn't. It was just kind of like a fallback in the plot, and it's having to the justification for why it's there. And the deal was with her, if I could not justify it, then it had to go. And a lot of stuff got cut out because it was all filler. It was all bullshit that didn't have any place in the story to begin with, and it became a better story because of that. So I wholeheartedly agree with that.
And yet, look at Stephen King. He constantly, in his books, will, and some people love this and some people hate it, he'll introduce a character, you'll walk with that character for a chapter or so, and then he kills him and you move on. And you look back at it and say, that didn't really add anything to the story. It didn't forward the plot. It wasn't important to the rest of the characters. In fact, the rest of the characters might not even know about it. There's a particular aside in The Stand where that's the case, where he goes off about this guy who's in jail, and he meets Randall Flagg, and okay, it shows us that Randall Flagg was a bad man, but we already knew that he was a bad man with demonic powers. It doesn't tell the reader anything more. It doesn't do anything at all for the rest of the characters. And King does this kind of thing all the time. And obviously, he's the most fantastically successful horror writer there's ever been. And his name is going to go down in history for his impact on the latter half of the 20th century. And yet, that he breaks a lot. So it's like it's good advice, except when it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has to find their own rhythm. It's going to be different for everyone. Yeah.
So we have a question in the audience from Edward again. Thank you, Edward. This is a question for Patrick. What types of literary devices would you recommend that would allow the reader to better utilize their imaginations when they read a story?
Read a story.
When they read a story.
Well, I think... Boy, I've never really considered when you're reading a story, so I'm going to turn it around and answer the question you didn't ask, and if that's not good enough, please follow up. When you're writing a story, it's important to engage three senses. Is typically what you're looking for when you're telling a story and you want someone's imagination to really latch on and really hook into a scene. If you can engage 3 out of 5 of the major senses, then you'll probably be in good shape in terms of getting the reader to really buy in. And that doesn't mean that every single description has to have 3 and no more than 3 and no less than 3, but most of the time, if you can hit sight is the easy one, right? Most of us are very, very visual people, and so tell us what things look like, but then gives, something about touch, something about a smell, something about, how something feels, and give us enough to be able to anchor that in our memory somehow, and it'll feed the reader's imagination enough to be able to get them through the scene, and at the end have them go, wow, it felt like I was there. And I think that books that do that well, you don't need a booster as a reader to boost your imagination, because it's already there. You have enough detail that you're going to grab it and roll with it. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's what I got.
That's a good answer to that question, actually. And I also like the little aside about the question I didn't ask. Thank you for that. I did, for the record, I did make a note about it.
So I don't want to be like a politician where I'm ignoring the question to go say something else. I was trying to answer it. I just wasn't quite sure what it was I was supposed to be answering.
No, I thought that was a good answer to that question, and you're absolutely right. I think, especially engaging the senses makes a very effective scene. My personal favorite is getting the smell and the sound of something particularly gross. If something gross is going on, you focus on the smell and the sound, because then you get them in the gut. That's going to turn their stomach.
Yes.
Oh, it can be really hard with sound without hitting onomatopoeia. And onomatopoeia doesn't often work as well as people would like to think it does, and it often comes across, it'll throw people out of a narrative, because, a wet splorch, you're just like, really? Splorch? Is that where we're going with this? It can be tough. I mean, you can tell people what things sound like, and yet I kind of have to go with Greg Farady's advice. He's in my beta reading group. I have an amazing group of beta readers, and we read, most of us read most of each other's stuff before it ever sees publication, and we have very diverse backgrounds. And Greg gave me some advice a couple years ago. He said, don't tell me what it smells like. Tell me what the smell smells like. And the first time I read it, I was like, what? What the heck are you talking about? And then I realized that he really did have a very good point there, that you need to be a little more, for the things that you are choosing to highlight, you need to make sure that you're being vivid enough to anchor it where you want. I give an example, actually, in this essay in Writers on Writing, where I mentioned somebody who smells like onions and baby powder.
Mm-hmm.
Baby powder. It's
delicious.
Well, but there's a huge
delicious
difference between he gave off a light bouquet like caramelized onions and baby powder versus his armpits reeked like rotting onions inadequately masked with baby powder. Those are two totally different things. And so as a writer, when you're saying, oh, he smelled like onions and baby powder, chances are that people are going to lean more towards the second one than the first. But if you want that sweet kind of caramelized smell to go along with something, you can do that. You just have to make sure you're doing it properly. You can't just say, oh, it smelled like meat. Does it smell like delicious grilled chicken, or does it smell like that pork you left in a bag for too long in your fridge?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's being vivid. Care, right? You have to know what you're doing. This whole writing gig, it's actually easy to write. It's not very easy to write well. And it takes deliberate thought about what you're trying to evoke. And so yeah, when you're dealing with writing the dances, you really have to be careful about, don't just tell me, oh, it sounds like songbirds. Or even worse, it sounds like birds. Okay, songbirds, crows, eagles, what are we talking about here? Because I've got a little bird that sits outside my window and goes beep, 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 beep every morning. And that sound of that bird makes me want to kill things. Because it starts at like 4 in the morning.
I would want to murder that fucking bird so hard.
Yeah. That bird wouldn't live long if it was outside my window.
Well, I live in the middle of the woods, so there's not much I can do about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're kind of
Edward said that that was a great answer, Patrick, and thank you.
Sure.
So, Joe finally decided to join us. Thank you, Joe, for tuning in.
Joe!
Hi, Joe!
Hi,
Joe! He said, not sure if this was covered earlier, but what does Patrick's shirt say?
Oh.
It's a Coheed and
Coheed and
Cambria.
Cambria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a picture of a guy whose head is exploding, and underneath, way down here, it says "Good Eye Sniper."
Nice.
I like it. Good band.
Yeah, there's a line in a song called "A Favor House Atlantic" that is "Good Eye Sniper. Now I'll shoot, you run."
That's great.
Nice.
I like it.
I'm a huge prog rock dork, so I love Coheed and Cambria.
I do like
they're great.
prog rock. That's the best, I think. Personally.
It's great writing music because it's all gibberish.
Uh-huh.
It's well, Coheed and Cambria in particular. I write to a lot of Coheed, and one of the reasons why is because based on this series of nonlinear and incomplete graphic novels that the lead singer wrote, and they don't make any sense. He uses words in ways that you don't actually they don't mean what they would mean in normal English. So even when you understand the words, you don't understand what they mean. And what that does for me is that it basically just makes the lyrics are another part of the music. And so I don't have a plot line or anything rolling through my head that gets disrupted by what he's saying, because it's really just part of the tune. So it's like listening to classical music or something like that, where there isn't a narrative to follow. I mean, they're there, obscure for me to pick up, and I haven't done the heavy research, even though I love the band. I don't really want to know what the hell he's talking about, because then I probably wouldn't be able to write to it so well.
Right.
Yeah. Stephanie, since we're on the subject of, listening to music while you write, now I'm curious, do you listen to anything in particular while you work?
Yeah, I actually, for every book that I've done, or any like singular piece that I've submitted for an anthology, it always has a song attached to it. So all of my books have their own playlists that I create,
Nice.
and then I listen to them on loop the entire time that I'm writing the book, which is a little bit maddening. And sometimes it makes it a little bit hard to enjoy certain songs, after things are done. But I absolutely have to have music. It's usually, most of the time, I have a playlist that, has lyrics and everything with it, but then when I'm actually writing, it'll strictly be instrumentals. But I have to have chaos. Like, I usually have music playing, the TV's on, there's a movie playing somewhere, like something's always, like if things are silent, I feel like I'm very yellow wallpaper and I can't handle it.
Yeah.
So I need to be in like breeding chaos for me to function and work properly.
No, that is heartening, because I do the same thing. I always have a playlist or something that I have done in the past and still do on occasion, especially if I'm trying to focus. Is I'll put I'll pick a song that either fits the mood that I'm going for or trying to convey in the fiction, and I'll put that song on repeat.
Yeah.
And just have it play over and over again. And anytime I tell people that I do this, they look at me like I'm out of my fucking mind.
Oh, no, I think it's totally normal. I did, when I was writing Morning Jewelry, I listened to most of Jill Tracy's, genre of work. And I mean, all the albums, all her instrumental stuff, like, she was my life for like that entire time that I was writing it.
Yeah.
And I think but it was really cool because she ended up blurbing the book. And I emailed her and I said, hey, like, I just want to tell you how influential your music has been to me and how it's shaping my writing career. And she's like, well, let me see it. And I gave it to her and she blurbed the book, and I was like, this is fucking cool now.
That's awesome.
Like, what are the chances of that happening? So, yeah.
It's always cool when you get to make connections like that.
Mhm. Totally.
Yeah, I have a book that it's out with my agent right now, and it's called Murmurs in Glass. And the main character is a violinist who's very, very psychotic break. And he's a classical violinist, and so the entire time I was writing it, I was listening to classical violin, which is very different for me. I don't typically, while writing, like I said, I usually listen to prog rock, Rush or Coheed and Cambria or something like that. But for this character, I wrote the entire time listening to various violin concertos and things like that, it was very different for me, and yet it's a very different book too. This is the book where, if it gets published, my teaching career might be in jeopardy, so that should be fun.
Nice.
It's about a guy being sexually stalked by a dean while with teaching high school. So, but yeah, it's interesting how music can really impact the mood you're in, the way the words are going to come out on the page.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I just wrapped up a novella about a month or so ago. It's about a progressive metal band, and so I listened to nothing but like Tool and Opeth all throughout that process, and I thought my wife was gonna kill me by the end of it because she got tired of hearing that shit. But it was pretty interesting to really dive into that and see how some of the the abrasiveness came over into the language of the story, and also some of the lyrical qualities as well. So I'm all for listening to music, while working. I can't work without it.
Nope.
Although I can't work with the TV on.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that either.
It's a hot mess of crazy when it comes to that. I need it all. And I know that, like, I posted about it the other day. Like, I also, like, my, like, writing area, I decorate it for the project that I'm working on. So one of my walls in my apartment, I just collaged for the last poetry collection. So, I mean, there were words, there were pictures, everything. So, I mean, I really, like, it has to be so hands-on and distracting for me in order to, like, comprehensively put anything down and make sense of it. So it's just a hot mess over here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I usually try to surround myself with various totems of that kind of fit the mood. I mean, I didn't set it up, but you guys can probably see the stump from a bloody foot that I have up there. Next to that stack of books. That was supposed to be a running gag with these shows because I had my suitcase was in the corner for the first show, and there was in the chat people were like, "What's in Todd's suitcase?" Like, why are you focusing on my suitcase? Like, that's where I keep the bodies. So the second episode, I had the foot sticking out of the suitcase, but I've since cleaned my office, so no suitcase.
That's good. Pretty funny.
Yeah, I approve full-heartedly of that. Oh.
So, I did make a note here to follow up on a question, and there's also a question in chat, but I got to ask this before I forget about it again. This is a question for Patrick and Stephanie as well. So Patrick mentioned that he's got a problem with prologues. What's your problem with prologues, and why are you wrong?
Okay, so we'll start with why I'm wrong. I'm wrong because there are people who do prologues perfectly well, and my main issue with prologues is that usually it is an indication that the writer has started the story in the wrong place. Okay. If you need a prologue to make your reader curious about what's happening next, then maybe what's happening next isn't that interesting. How many times have you heard a story about an editor or a writer who's beta reading something for someone who's new, who will take the first 10 pages and just tear it out and go, okay, here's where your story starts. Yeah. Just say, okay, the beginning of your story is not that interesting. I read an enormous amount of fantasy growing up, and I haven't read a whole lot of it in recent years, except maybe George R.R. Martin, if he ever finishes, But the thing about fantasy books is that one of the things that the reason I got away from them is because they got so about how they start. It's like, oh, look, it's the kid who's a country bumpkin in this tiny little village with an annoying name, and then a stranger comes to town, and you get the inciting incident and it's perfectly fine that they're following the hero's journey, but you don't have to start in the same damn way over and over and over again. And it's because that's boring. It doesn't work. I mean, Robert Jordan did it with The Wheel of Time, but The Wheel of Time isn't that good. It's just like, oh, look, it's another kid who's stuck in his town for this reason. It's the same thing. Like, you can get away with it in a in a movie like Beetlejuice, where, people moving into a house, not that interesting. Turns into a very funny movie very quickly, but how many haunted house type stories have you read where the first 5 or 6 pages is, okay, people are moving in, it's like, ooh, they're brand new. Guess what? People live in fucking houses, okay? You don't have to tell us that these people are brand new moving in. Just have them already there, and you can, with one comment, say, with one line, you can give us the indication that they haven't been there very long.
Right.
And keep going with your story. And instead, you're going to give me 5 pages about, oh, look, there's still boxes stacked in the corner. And. Shut the hell up and get to the story. Prologues, though, this is what people will do, is they'll keep all that crap. So they've got 5 or 8 pages of boring, and they'll throw in a prologue at the beginning which shows what happened to the previous tenants when the ghostly baddie did its ghostly bad things. And that's only one example, but yeah, prologues suck, and I'm right.
Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I don't. I mean, I don't think I feel as strongly. I don't know that they get under my skin that bad, but I do agree that, I mean, there are instances, I can't think of any off the top of my head, where I wasn't pissed off that it was there, but I do think most of the time that they're unnecessary. And I remember when I was in the Seton Hills program, when I wrote my novel, I had one, and both of my mentors were like, Dina, they're like, get that shit out of there. And I fought for it really hard for a long time, and it took me a lot of reading to realize a lot of things that Patrick just said. Like, it is unnecessary, because you only need that one comment to just kind of reflect back to everything that a prologue is going to tell you in 8 pages, and then you're right in the center of the story. You're right in the action, and things are happening, rather than, it's the whole, like, showing versus telling. Like, I don't need you to tell me everything. Just put me right in the center of the action. And I think that's why probably most prologues fail, is because that's what they're doing. They're just dancing around everything before the story actually starts.
Try this. Yeah. Go to the bookstore and find 5 books with prologues.
Yeah.
Skip the prologue and read the next couple of pages. Pages that happen after the prologue, and ask yourself after page 1, 2, or 3, do I care? Is this interesting? And if the answer is no, then you'll understand my deep-seated, seething hatred for the prologue.
I think you read a lot more fantasy than I do, and I feel like prologues are probably more common in fantasy. Is that a fair? Because I feel like I don't, and maybe I don't read a whole lot of science fiction. Like, I feel like I very rarely ever see them in horror.
Okay, because I see them quite a bit in horror, but then again, I'm sensitive to the topic, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's also true.
I must admit something right now before you go on. I only asked that question because I knew it would trigger the hell out of you.
Oh, really? You evil bastard.
I'm almost impossible to anger, but I'm relatively easy to irk. And just when it comes to writing, when I'm reading something, I put down way more books than I finish. Way more books than I finish. I used to finish every book that I've ever read. And some people say, oh, I'll give it 50 pages. I give it until the moment I don't care what the next sentence says. And that might be in paragraph 2. It might be page 50. I've read 500 pages of a 700-page book and then gone, okay, I'm done. Because that was the moment where I'm like, okay, what happens next? Don't care. And prologues are an example of you can't fire me, I quit. And if you're not familiar with the Turkey City lexicon, I really, really recommend it. It's a common set of vocabulary that it's on SIFWA's website. It's on Flash Fiction Online, and it's a common set of vocabulary that people can use when they're beta reading each other's stuff. And you can't fire me, I quit is when an author uses something and it's the idea was so crazy that nobody would ever think it would work. And what you're doing is you're telling the reader, yeah, I know this is preposterous, but I didn't work hard enough to make something that wasn't preposterous. And that's why they call it You Can't Fire Me, I Quit. And to me, a prologue is
that's good.
Not always. It's often an example of that, where you're admitting, yeah, I know the beginning of my book is boring, but begin it, and it's hard to figure out where to begin it. So instead of not including that boring part, think in the beginning before that to make it so that you're interested enough that my hook is going to come not in narrative order, so that I can cheat and make you interested instead of starting the story in such a way that's going to keep you interested from the beginning.
Right. It's a cop out in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Note to self: don't
use
send
don't use a prologue
books to Patrick Frievald for blurb purposes. It's like I can just hear it now because total disclosure, first 2 novels have prologues and epilogues. And I'm a fan. I don't have but I totally agree with you as well. I don't get me wrong. But I can just see it now if I were to send book 3 off to Patrick. It's like I don't think we can put that on the cover. Like this fucking shit. Patrick Frievald.
The group, it shouldn't surprise anybody at this point to learn that in my beta reading group, I have a reputation for being extraordinarily blunt. And Rena Mason at one point told me, she's like, wow, if I didn't know you, this would have made me cry. And it's the point of beta reading. The point of beta reading is to help the person improve what they've written. And to that end, you need to not spare their feelings. You don't go out of your way to be a jerk, but you don't go out of your way to be nice either. You just say, okay, if this part doesn't work, in my opinion, it doesn't work, and here's why. But at the same time, all writing advice sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if your story really needs that prologue and it works well, and whatever comes after your prologue is not boring as shit without your prologue, cool. Go with it. It's just that more often than not, that's the case. And I think that's what a lot of this writers on writing stuff comes down to, is that there are common errors that people make over and over and over again. And as you get writing more and more as a profession, you start to see those errors more and more with things that you read that are commercially published, things that you read for a blurb, things that you read to beta read. You start to see these common errors, and it can be fine. But you're probably not that person. Whoever is watching this right now, you're probably not that person. So unless you've looked at it and said, nope, this is exactly how it needs to be, and here's why, and you're doing it on purpose, log and start your story in the right place. That's really it just comes down to deliberation and doing things on purpose.
Kind of like me asking the question to get you all riled up. No, thank you though. That was a good answer.
Sure.
So now back to the question that was asked in the chat. Kevin Ashton said, question for the panel. If writing is not your day job, what is your personal ideal time to write?
I edit professionally full time. So any creative writing that I do is at night. But even if I didn't have a day job, it would still be at night because I am the least. Oh my God, I'm terrible in the morning as a person, as a writer, as anything. Like it's bad. It's bad all the way around. So I usually start writing around 8 o'clock. And I usually go until about maybe midnight, 1 o'clock, and then I'm out. So, and I try to do it every day, if not every other day.
Cool. Patrick, what about you?
I'm a high school teacher as well as a beekeeper, and I run a robotics team. I'm the person I know, and I write when I feel like it, and that usually works for me. Right now, that's got me on. That has me on pace to do about 2 to 3 novels a year, plus a dozen short stories or so. I have a time. I'm very opportunistic. So you know what a general school teacher's day is like. You teach some classes, then you have some breaks in between grading done and whatever else. And then you've got that hour after school that there's a late bus, but so the kids can come in for extra help. And most of the time they don't, because who cares? It's only AP Physics. It's not that hard. Do I sound bitter? But So the
That's great.
if I find myself in my classroom with time to kill, then I'll sit down and write for 40 minutes. And voice recognition software. So I'll just close the door to my classroom and put on my headphones and talk to my computer for 40 minutes. And then, so I'll write in the middle of the day. I'll write on my lunch break if I'm not eating lunch with other people, because that would be pretty rude. Right before my wife gets home from work. And so after I've gotten home, before she's gotten home, she conks out on the couch with some sort of animal on her, usually around 7:45 to 8 o'clock. Most nights she gets up a lot earlier than I do. And after she falls asleep, that's a good time for me to write. So if I'm not watching TV or something like that, then I will sit down and write. So it's really opportunistic. Most Saturdays I'll make time. And that's what it's about right there, is making time, because you're to figure out when you can do it. I haven't been very good at it in the last 6 weeks. I haven't gotten a lot written, which is bad because I have a deadline on October 31st. But I have a set time. I just write whenever it happens to be. Often that ends up being the evening, because when you're home and everyone else is asleep, that's an easy time to get stuff done without being disturbed.
Yep.
Yeah. I typically write at night, like Stephanie, but I also have a full-time day job that is kind of, mentally draining. So sometimes in the evenings I am not at peak like I used to be in my young whippersnapper days. So I will try to like carve out time on, at lunch, and I'll sit and, put my earbuds in at my desk at work, and, people know not to talk to me during that time. I wish it was like that all the time, but
I'm with you. I know that feeling.
But I'll shut off the world for 45 minutes and write during the day. And if I'm like kind of like on the latter half of a story, and I know it's just I know where I'm going to get to the end, I'll kind of pull double duty and write at lunch. I'll write in the evenings. I will I'll be writing as much during any free time I have, period. But also like Patrick, I don't write every day. I write when I feel like it, when the the need strikes me. And yeah, so it's worked so far. So yeah.
Can I do some math real quick?
Sure.
One of the things that people talk about a lot is, I don't have time to write, and the only proper response to that is bullshit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think writer's block is a bullshit excuse too, personally. I think.
Yeah. Right, and I'm in the middle of a 6-week stretch where I haven't written very much, but it's not writer's block.
Right.
It's I feel like doing other things, and so or I'm too busy, and life kind of kiboshed me a little bit. But I mean, just look at this. About a page, right? So if you can write 1 page a day, 500 words, in a week you've got 2,500 words. In 10 weeks you've got 25,000 words, and in 40 weeks you have 100,000 words. 1 page a day is a novel a year. And so if you don't have time to write, look, a lot of published writers are only really writing about a novel every other year, every 3 years, or something like that. So if you're telling me that you can't write a half a page a day and publish and get a novel done every other year, then you're just making excuses for why you don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Shut up, sit down, and write.
Yep.
And so finding the time, you don't have to have these huge blocks where you sit down and write 5,000 words at a time. Sit down, write 1 page. Okay? And even if you miss a month, you've still written a 90,000 word novel in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
The math is on your side.
I hate math.
That's the only time I'm going to agree with that.
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah. But no, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, you hear from a lot of people where they're complaining that, like, I don't have time to write, or I can't find the time to write. I look at it like, no, there's just too much you don't want to give up in order to write.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're always sacrificing something. You're sacrificing your time. You got friends, they're going out to a party, they're going out to the bar or whatever. Well, do you go out to the bar or do you work on your book?
Yeah. Video games.
Mm-hmm.
Don't play video games.
That's my Achilles heel.
I disconnected my cable a long time ago, and I'm not tech savvy at all, so I have no idea actually how to make it like work again, which worked great because now I don't very rarely ever watch TV unless I'm binge watching Netflix for god awful amounts of time. But yeah, no, you make time.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I will second what Patrick said about video games. They're a huge time suck.
Yeah,
trust
beautiful,
me.
Terrible time suck.
Yeah, I lost a month of riding to Skyrim.
Yeah. They are. Video game companies actually hire psychologists that help them make their games more enjoyable and more addicting. The only things you've ever enjoyed in life are serotonin and dopamine, and everything that's addictive is addictive because it creates serotonin and dopamine. So video games produce serotonin and dopamine in your brain, and so you do that and it's fun, and so you do it some more and it's fun, and 60 hours of your life later you're like, cool, I just won Fallout 2, right? Or I just won Fallout 4. And then you're like, gee, and I could play that again, and let's be a good guy this time instead of a bad guy. And then you win it again, and then you say, oh, let's do it again. Well, without using any guns, let's just use melee weapons and do it again. And I'm speaking from experience because my brother lived with me for a couple years after his marriage imploded, and he brought and I don't know what it was, an Xbox, a PlayStation, whatever game console that was, and he had Fallout 4, and I lost months of my life. It just vanished, and it was fun. But what do I have to say about it now? I'm like, yep, I played that there video game, and that's it. That's all I have. And that's insane. It's completely insane because it's a giant pile of nothing. And so, I won't have video games in my house. I don't have them on my phone. I don't have them on my computer. I won't get anywhere near them because they're really fun.
Yeah.
But that's all they are. At least when I'm playing, I play tabletop war games, and I, spend enormous amounts of money on these stupid miniatures, and I assemble them and I paint them up, and I go play games with my friends. At least there, I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm having a good time. I have these things that I've painted and I've created, and I can take, and I can show them to people and say, hey, look at this. I know you don't care because I'm a giant nerd, but look, I made this. I painted this, and it's really neat. And at least there's something. Yeah, it's just a hobby, and I don't begrudge people their hobbies. I don't believe in guilty pleasures. But if you're someone who wants to be creative and you're playing video games, every moment you're spending those video games is a drain on what could be your creative time.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yep.
There's a question in the chat, and it's from Joe, and it's directed at me, and he wants to know, where's the dead body?
I don't know.
And this actually, somebody said I think it's in the closet with the open door behind him, Joe. That's actually not a closet. That's my hallway to my house. So my closet's over there. So
that's where the lots of dead bodies are.
Yes. Yeah. So, also, Kevin Ashton said, hey, don't knock being a nerd. We're all nerds in our own way. Goddamn right we are.
Oh, yeah.
Proud of it.
Oh, yeah. But trust me, don't. I'm certainly not knocking being a nerd. Like I said, I teach physics. I run a robotics team. I keep bees. I play tabletop war games. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I fit the nerd, dork, dweeb, geek. Pick any of those. It applies to me, and I fly that flag high. And if people have a problem with it, that's what these are for, right? So,
well, I couldn't say that any better.
Yeah, I mean, I say that to my students all the time. I call myself a giant geek or a nerd, and sometimes they'll kind of laugh, and I'm like, yeah, just own it. The things you like.
Yeah, don't be ashamed of who you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, we are a little bit over an hour. I've got one more question for you guys. and then we'll wrap this up. So, what are you guys reading right now?
I am reading. So I'm rereading Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Lanny Taylor because I'm teaching it in my course this semester. And I'm also rereading Miss Peregrine's School for Peculiar Children because that was in my class too. So it's mostly, I'm giving myself homework as the teacher right now. So, yeah.
That's cool. Patrick?
So I'm reading I'm reading three things at the moment. The nonfiction, I'm reading How Not to Be Wrong, The Power of Mathematical Thinking. It's a page turner, let me tell you. It's actually really quite good. I just finished The Name of the Wind, which I had talked about before, by Patrick Rothfuss, and book 2 arrived yesterday, so I'm going to be picking that up. And then I am rereading American Nocturne by Hank Schwabel, which is a collection of his short stories. And if you like the dark urban fantasy type stuff, Hank's Jake Hatcher books are really quite good, but they're a very enjoyable read, but American Nocturne blows them away. Hank's short fiction is fantastic. And I don't reread things much. As we were talking about before, you don't have time to read everything from the people that you've met, right? So,
right.
But I read American Nocturne and was so blown away by it that I needed to reread it with a lot more attention, as opposed to just reading it for the original experience. Now I'm reading it for the education. I'm reading it as something to say, why is this story so powerful? Why did this stay with me so well? What about this character was so evocative? And so, and it really is that good. So I would very, very much recommend. Actually, all three of those are really good. Patrick Rothfuss books, The Power of Mathematical Thinking, How Not to Be Wrong. It's very good. And yes, and also Nocturne. I know that's a hard sell for most people, but yeah. So that's what I'm currently reading.
Okay. I am currently about halfway through Stranded by Bracken McLeod.
So jealous. I can't wait.
Enjoying it immensely. Just haven't had much reading time, unfortunately. I kind of juggle books. I'm also reading Every House is Haunted by Ian Rogers. Also really good. And I just finished reading The Fisherman by John Langan.
Yeah,
another one that's on my to-do list.
Yeah,
yep.
That one's probably a contender for my book of the year, to be honest. And
Langan's really good.
That's my first Langan novel. I've never read any of his other stuff.
Okay.
So
he's an impressive writer. Langan and Stephen Graham Jones are probably two of the most impressive writers in the modern day, in my opinion. They're both very, very good. I love
Stephen Graham Jones. His stuff's amazing. I'm jealous of him and his fucking talent. And I also just finished Experimental Film by Gemma Files.
Oh man, you're reading everything that's on my to-read list. I'm so jealous. I'm very jealous of you right now.
Last year for the HWA's Horror Selfies campaign, they were raising money for animal rescue, and so you could just take a picture of yourself with an animal and submit it for this contest, and you go into a drawing where you could win every book that Cheesing Publications has published through January of this past year. And the problem with that is that I already had a TBR list that was hundreds of books long.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, I have Cheesing's entire catalog on my laptop. And I've been working through them, and they have an incredible aesthetic. They don't publish crap. Most books that I pick, most books that I start, I put down, and I have yet to put down a Cheesing book. They're just consistently very, very good. They recently published The Rib from Which I Remake the World by Ed Kurtz, and that's an incredible book too. I read that
one that's
recently.
on my to-read list. Damn, you guys.
So good.
So yeah, I geeked out in front of the Cheesing table at Nikon this summer and just gushed over, like, I love your books. They just look so good.
They're fantastic. They are. They're fantastic.
They had a hard time selling anything to me, though.
Yeah, I bet they did.
Well,
Like, yeah, I own pretty much all of those
I
except
have
for
all
those
of it.
4.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
So, all right. Well, we're gonna close this thing down, but before we do, just want to say thank you to Stephanie and Patrick for joining me today. Traditionally, what we do here is kind of go down the list and let you guys talk about where people can read more of your work, anything you have coming out. I realize this might be a little redundant because we talked about this at the beginning, but who cares? We're gonna do it again anyway because it's my fucking show and we'll do what I want. So
that's right.
All right.
So Stephanie, start us off.
Yeah.
Where can people read more of your work, and what do you have coming out?
Okay, so you can find my stuff on the Raw Dog Screaming Press website, on Dark Regions website, my personal website. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. It's Just After Sunset. And like I said, my debut novel is up for pre-order. It's called The Eighth, and it's about the 7 deadly sins, finding the next person to wrangle into their gang. And my next poetry collection, oh man, you guys are going to be the first people to hear the title. It's called Sheet Music for My Acoustic Nightmare, and
Nice.
that
Nice.
should be out next year.
Right on.
Cool.
Patrick, what do you got cooking?
Okay, so just this past weekend came out Never Fear the Tarot. It's an anthology where they, the publishers, the editors, shuffled a tarot deck. They got a bunch of authors to sign on. They shuffled a tarot deck. They dealt us each a card, and then we had to write a story around the interpretation of that card, both upright and inverted. And that was a lot of fun. I got the star, and so of course with the star, I had to make it about rock and roll. That came out this week, and so that's Never Fear the Tarot. Debuting at AlienCon in Santa Clara this coming weekend is Alien Encounters, and I have a story in there. And that's all about alien stuff. I mean, AlienCon is being put on by the people who do the stuff on the History Channel, stuff like that. So, so I've got a couple short stories there. The third Matt Rowley book, Jade Gods, just broke in August, and that is think hyper-violent Captain America with fallen angels.
Nice.
That's essentially the Matt Rowley books in a nutshell. And all of this can be found at patrick.frievald.com. That's my website, as long as you can spell my last name, Freivald. And I'm the only Patrick Frievald on the planet, so if you find me on Twitter, I'm at Patrick Frievald. On Facebook, I'm Patrick Frievald. I do get a lot of bots trying to friend me and stuff, so if you heard about me on the podcast, you want to find me, just send me a quick message too. But like I said, I am the only one, so if you find a Patrick Frievald anywhere, then that's me.
Cool. And that's it for us today, folks. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm your host, Todd Keisling. This has been Beneath the Lake. And again, Writers on Writing Volume 4 drops next week, I believe on Friday the 28th. It is now up for pre-order on Amazon. I encourage you all to go check it out, and where you can read Patrick's and Stephanie's essays along with a number of others. It's very informative, especially if you are a young writer looking to learn the ropes. So again, this has been Beneath the Lake. I'm Todd Keisling, and we'll see you later.
Bye.